Do you battle with food every day? If so, who wins? Welcome to the weekly edition of Excellent Living with Cheryl Martin. I'm Doris McMillan. Certified National Health Professional Dr. Celeste Owens says, it's time to make peace with hunger. She believes that if you're going to live out God's will, you must make your health a priority. Dr. Owens is a psychologist by training and trauma specialist. She's also a speaker and the author of the books, The 40-Day Surrender Fast and Making Peace with Hunger. And that's the topic of her conversation with Cheryl.
There are thousands of dieting books out there, but you say, Dr. Celeste, your book, Making Peace with Hunger, is not one of them. So how would you describe your book?
Yeah, I would say that Making Peace with Hunger is different in that it's not giving the audience a prescribed diet to follow, but really helping the reader to uncover their why behind the eating. So I think that's where it takes it to the next level.
What do you mean when you say making peace with hunger?
Well, it's something I've had to live and had to be able to experience myself, but I went through a process where I had to understand why I was hungry, quote unquote, why I was eating is more specific. And I had to make peace with some times when I was going to have to deal with some of the emotional stuff that was connected to my eating and make peace with this idea that I couldn't let food be the comfort any longer, that I had to start to utilize other tools that I had in order to satisfy whatever that emotional need is or was.
You talk about it's important for a person to find out the why behind the eating. Name some of those whys.
Yeah, great question. So some of the whys behind the eating, again, a lot of the why for us, particularly here in the US, are connected to emotional things that have happened to us, or emotional responses, I should say, to things that have happened to us. So some of those emotions are connected to things that aren't bad, things that actually are pleasant. And sometimes we eat to recreate certain situations or events even. Sometimes it's not connected to something that's negative. Sometimes it can be, but that's what I'm talking about, getting to the why behind it, being able to trace it back to the beginning.
When we look in the United States, obesity is now a public health threat. What do you think is going on there?
Food is everywhere. Let's say that. And food is legal. So you can eat as much food as you want and as often as you want here in the States. So sometimes we do use food as substitutes. And that's why I believe part of the reason why we're so obese is that we are using food as a substitute. And, if I'm happy, I eat. I'm sad, I eat. I'm depressed, I eat. I'm anxious, I eat. I have a big whatever coming up, I eat. We're celebrating, we eat. So a lot of what we do here in the States is centered around eating. And that certainly plays into us being overweight or obese, in fact, as a nation.
So why is our love affair with food so hard for us to surrender?
It has fed us for so long and it becomes the go-to because again, it's readily available for most people in the United States. It is, it's legal. It's all of those things that people aren't going to really frown on. So it becomes our go-to because it's a quick, easy way to reset ourselves. But in that reset, we often come to a space and a feeling of guilt, shame, condemnation after we have used food in that way. But initially when we use food, when I go for that brownie, which I don't eat brownies anymore, believe it or not, but when I used to go for that brownie, I would get that quick fix and feel a little better for about 30 minutes. And then the guilt hit and the shame hits and all of that. And I got tired of that yo-yo cycle. But again, the reason why we choose food is because it's quick, easy, it's fast. I get a quick fix. I get the feeling I'm trying to get both physiologically and psychologically. And in some respects, I get to move on.
What was the epiphany in your life when it came to your eating choices and the conviction that you needed to deal with your choices?
It was me in my early 30s. I was married, had been married probably a couple of years, and was also about 3 years post breast cancer. And in those 3 years, I learned a lot more about food and its connection with the way our bodies operate and if we are going to be well or not. And even in learning those things about certain foods that can trigger cells to act in a certain way or bring about a certain disease, I did not change my diet at all. Like I was still the biggest junk food junkie out there, eating tons of candy, chips, cookies, cakes, whatever. I would eat dessert instead of dinner. So I started to think something's wrong with this. If you know this is harming you and you say you want to live, then there's something really seriously wrong here. And I remember just saying a prayer, like, where do I start? I need to change this, but I can't. And I remember the first directive being, don't eat in the bed. And that might sound funny to some people, like, huh? But I just remember hearing this like little small whisper, don't eat in the bed. And I was like, don't eat in the bed. No, you could take anything else but my bed eating.
That's
And
something you did on a regular basis.
on the regular, like everyday basis, every day I would eat in the bed, and it was at night. And that's a long story too, but it was at night. It became my comfort. And even while married, like I'm married, with all this comfort at night and still was eating in the bed. And my husband would often say, man, when I get in the bed, why are there all these crumbs in the bed? And I'm like, who cares? Just wipe them off. Why are you worried about it? So I was still eating. So when he said, when I heard don't eat in the bed, I was like, okay, this is crazy. I'm not going to be able to do this. I don't want to do this. And again, it was just part of I didn't realize it then, but it was just part of comfort for me, eating in the bed. And I would have it in my nightstand and I would be sneaking to eat it so my husband wouldn't hear me. Craziness. So I complied. I said, okay, I'm going to try it. And then the first night I didn't eat in bed and it was like really hard. I could barely sleep. And then the next night, until eventually it became a habit. I don't eat in the bed any longer. We're talking like, I don't know, 13 years later, not eating in the bed. That was purely a miracle. And then it just went on to other directives, but that was where it started for me.
So when you decided to not eat in bed or to make changes, when I read your book, you never really talked about the reason behind any of this was obesity. So that was not the issue.
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't the issue at all. Actually, I was religious about working out, religious about doing my crunches and squats and everything because I didn't want anybody to know my secret shame that I could eat 2,000 calories, 3,000 calories at once and could probably at that point have been diagnosed with some kind of eating disorder, being a psychologist by training, but kept on going, kept it moving. So I wasn't overweight. So even pregnant, I might have gained about 15 pounds. So overweight was not my issue.
It's interesting you brought this out because people who have a problem with weight can look at people who are average or underweight and assume they don't have a problem with eating. And you're saying that can be deceiving
Mm-hmm.
because just because a person is thin doesn't mean that they're not overeating.
Absolutely. I was a living witness. It does not mean that they're not overeating and they don't have a emotional connection, an unhealthy emotional connection to food. It has nothing to do with a person's body. And I tell people when I teach this that the minute you say, and I don't care what your weight is, I don't care if you're 300, you're 400 pounds, the minute you say, I'm going to make peace with hunger and I'm going to do everything that I feel I'm directed to do, and I'm going to start making these changes. I said, that's the minute you're free. So don't look at the scale. Don't worry about your weight. Just get free from the emotional connection.
And say that one more time. The minute they say,
I'm going to make peace with hunger and I'm going to do everything in me to make this peace, and I'm going to follow the directives I feel in my spirit, or however people say that, higher power, they're free. And you have to say it with your heart. So you can't just give lip service to it. And people always say, oh, I don't know what the difference is. The difference is when you say it with your heart, you feel that thing. Like you're like, oh my goodness, I'm about to make this and I'm about to do it. And you get to this place where you're like, I'm going to do it. And you know what it is? Part of it is when you hit the bottom It's one of those bottom issues. You have to hit the bottom where you're like, there is no way I'm doing this anymore. I'm not going to keep this connection. And the way you know you did it with your heart, this is probably the easiest way. When the directive comes and you actually do it. So when it said don't eat in bed, when I felt that in my spirit, don't eat in bed, and I actually complied, I had said that thing with my heart. That's how you know. And it doesn't mean you won't backslide. So let me let people know that too. It doesn't mean you won't backslide. But it does mean when you do, you don't go all the way back. You decide, I'm going to keep moving forward.
And you also say you can't do this on your own. You have to depend on God to help you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There is no way in the world I could have done this without God. I couldn't have done this on my own because, it was bigger than me. And I didn't even understand how deep it was until later, maybe like a year later, from that directive of not eating in bed. But I was just willing to say yes because I was so tired of fighting with myself and feeling condemned and feeling bad and shameful. And that was my bottom. I was like, I'm tired of this. And started listening to that directive.
That was Dr. Celeste Owens, a psychologist and certified natural health professional. She's the author of the book, Making Peace with Hunger, today's topic. To learn more about Dr. Owens and her resources, just visit her website, drcelesteowens.com. That's drcelesteowens.com. You're listening to the weekly broadcast, Excellent Living with Cheryl Martin. Let's return to the conversation.
You said something I thought was very powerful, that our food choices can determine the course of our destiny. Talk about that. And you referenced Daniel.
Absolutely. So our food choices can absolutely direct our lives in a very simple way. If you think about it this way, if I don't eat healthy, my body is affected, I'm sick, and then I can't do some of the other things I might want to do, like travel. So I get to travel internationally, and I wouldn't be able to take a 17-hour flight if I was sick or I was connected to the doctor in a way that I couldn't leave my area or my heart is too weak to do, all of these things that I want to do. So it will absolutely redirect the course of your purpose, because my purpose was to travel internationally and be able to do missions and be able to share my books with people and helping people to walk according to their purpose. But it wasn't that I was only going to do it where I lived. It was going to have to happen with me getting on a plane. And if I wasn't well, I wasn't going to be able to live it out. So it's just that simple, that we have to be able to do that. But also, when you are able to get control of your eating, when you're able to get to a place where you are making the decisions, you're directing your body, you're powerful. Like, there is pretty much nothing that can stop you. And I talk about Daniel in the book, how as a teenager, he had been brought into slavery, and he was still connected to God in a way that he's like, I'm going to be obedient to God, even in this strange land. And his making that decision to not defy his body with food was his way of saying that no matter what, I know I have a greater power in me that can overcome anything. And I can overcome food as a teenager. And in my 20s, I'm going to be able to overcome, whatever else came his way, like the lion's den. He would never have been able to do the lion's den if he couldn't conquer food as a teenager.
And he rejected the king's choicest foods.
Tell me about it. What a sacrifice. Because I could imagine that food probably looked good, probably smelled good. And he was willing to go with his vegetables and, all these whole foods that he was restricting himself to.
And some call that the Daniel fast today. Was that similar to the path you took after not eating in bed?
Yeah. So, I ended up doing Daniel in 2010 for 40
And
days.
talk about that fast.
Yeah. I ended up doing Daniel, the Daniel fast in 2010. This was after me making the decision to come home, and God had made this directive to leave everything that I was doing. I was in private practice as a psychologist. It was just all of these things that God told me to do that I thought were just thrilling. I loved my life at that point. And I came home, and the first directive God gave me was, and this, you guys, was after the no eating in bed. So the first directive he gave me was, do the Daniel fast and do it for 40 days. And 40 days I did it. And about 25% of the way there, I started thinking like, man, I'm kind of enjoying this food because
Now explain the Daniel fast. What are
oh,
you eating?
sure. So the Daniel fast is pretty much me eating real food, no processed food, whole foods, just the way God made them. So you got your beans, you got your whole grain rice, you have your fruits, your vegetables, of course, your salads, all things that come from nature, nothing that has been adulterated, anything like that.
No meat.
No meats. Oh yeah, no meats. Nothing like that. No meats. No, obviously no processed food, no sugar, no honey, no nothing sweet, nothing like that. So needless to say, me going from junk food junkie to Daniel fast, like talking about trial by fire, I was miserable. Like for the first 10 days, I remember being miserable, like every second of the day, like this is the worst life ever. And then around day 10, I was like, man, I made like a pot of lentils. I remember, and I sat down and eat it, and I was like, this tastes good. Really, I like this. And then I learned later that it takes about that amount of days to change your palate. I didn't know that then. And I started enjoying the food. And then about, I don't know, day 30, day 31, it just came in my head, you're a vegetarian. You're not going to eat meat anymore. And I was like, what? No way. And I often joke that I would have eaten a lot more meat prior to that fast if I knew I wasn't going to eat meat after. And I haven't eaten meat since. So, and I don't miss it now. I used to miss it at first, but I don't miss it now. But I also want to say too, you got to know what your body needs, your body wants. You got to listen to your own directions that come to your spirit. I'm not saying no one should eat meat. I don't say that at all. I always say that God has a tailor-made diet for everybody. Your body knows what it needs. It knows what it wants if you listen.
So it's important to seek God in this process in terms of what he would want you to do.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to seek him to know what it is that he wants because he knows your body better than anyone. And he knows what diet you need to be on. So I often hear my friend James Tate say, diet means, do I eat this? I love that. Do I eat this? That's all diet is. And that's what you're directing at God. Do I eat this? Is this for me? This is for my body. And mind you, your diet changes as you grow, as older. Your diet changes. Sometimes, at this point I don't eat meat, and then sometimes I might not want to eat something else later as I get older. So, which I am finding as I'm getting older, that some other things get eliminated too.
Now, in the process of you making peace with hunger, not only did you give up meat, but also sugar. Talk about that as you describe the perils of sugar.
Yeah. I often tell people sugar is from the devil. And by that, I mean white refined sugar has no nutritional value, has no purpose except to make things sweeter, obviously. But there's so many other things that we have in nature that sweeten things. And unfortunately, we've lost our connection with the things of the earth that actually sweeten. But white refined sugar, I was totally addicted. And in fact, if you look up studies where mice are given white refined sugar and cocaine, they're given the option, eventually they go to exclusively the white refined sugar. They just leave the cocaine alone.
Wow.
Yeah, because it does interact with certain receptors on the brain, gives that feeling of high. All of that is very addicting. And that's why it's in so many foods, our processed foods. It's even in the things that aren't sugary. If you look at your foods that are supposed to be savory, there's actually sugar in it, which is crazy.
And you say it's hard to master sugar.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You can't do it without God. You cannot master sugar. White refined sugar, that is, again, is so hard to do. But I remember, and I talk about this in the book, going on a sugar fast for like a whole year in 2011, which you could never have told me years prior, you're going to take a year off of sugar. No way. No, never. And I actually did it. And let me be specific too, because some people say, so that means you didn't put any sweetener in your coffee or So what I will say, that year without sugar meant that I was not having any desserts. So I wasn't having like cookies, cakes, brownies, nothing like that. I also wasn't having any breakfast that resembled a dessert, like a muffin or my personal favorite back then, Pop-Tarts. So I stopped all the things that looked like a dessert, tasted like a dessert, of course, donuts, all that kind of stuff at breakfast time. So I still would have an occasional bagel, which now I don't so much because that turns into sugar a lot of times, depending on what type of bagel you have. But so that's what my year without sugar looked like. And I didn't add any white refined sugar in. But I still ate some processed food. So I
And
just
what
wanted,
was the payoff at the end of the year?
oh my goodness, man, I felt so much better. So prior to that, I had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which was crazy. I was like in my 30s. I was like, are you kidding me? You want to take this medicine? No, I don't. I can't possibly have rheumatoid. That's the kind of craziness I do when someone tells me I have something. No, I don't. Are you crazy? No way. So, so I didn't have any joint pain after that year. I just felt amazing. Lost weight, obviously. I lost like 16 pounds. People were like, you look amazing. My skin looks so much better. I was like glowing. And even now my skin looks amazing. I'm not bragging on that. I'm just saying it changes the whole everything. Your skin is your biggest organ. So when you have a lot of breakouts and things like that, it's just your body telling you, hey, you need to clean me up. I'm toxic in here. I used to have adult acne, all my adult acne gone. So man, it's been pretty amazing. So yeah, it was totally beneficial.
And didn't you find also a correlation between sugar and some cancers?
Absolutely. So cancer cells, they're even able to do that when they give glucose and fructose and stuff like that to cancer cells in the petri dish. That they activate, like they're active. So they absolutely feed off of sugar.
What are some healthy snacks, real quickly? What are some?
Yeah, sure. So I actually make my own snacks now a lot of times. But if you don't want to make your own snacks, it's okay. But some things I do, I freeze bananas and then I have like this blender that will blend them up. And my daughter and I make banana ice cream. We'll add like maybe some peanut butter in sometimes or cinnamon, things like that. I make these fudge brownies out of dates. They're raw. I spent the year being raw, so I learned all these raw desserts that are awesome and amazing. Make these coconut balls with walnuts and coconut and raw organic honey. But you also can buy some things too if you're not into that. I like Lar bars. They're always 4 ingredients or less. They're called Lar bars, and they're amazing. They come in all these different flavors, cherry pie, and all these other things. They're so good. And I like Kind bars. So I like things that are like 5, 6, 7 ingredients or less because that lets me know it's unprocessed. So I eat those kind of things now.
When you talk about eating healthy and being very careful what you put in your mouth, are you talking or suggesting to only eat organic foods?
If you can, but if you can't, say your grace. Say your grace either which way. I gravitate mostly to organic, especially in, they have something called the Dirty Dozen, and you can Google that if you're not familiar with that terminology. But there are 12 foods each year that are identified as the dirtiest foods that you need to definitely buy organic. Like kale, unfortunately, made it like top of the Dirty Dozen list this year. So kale is one of those things you just absolutely have to buy organic.
What kinds of supplements should we be taking?
Yeah, so we should, everyone should be taking supplements. I don't care how good your diet is. I'm plant-based and I take supplements. So everybody should, let me just give you a couple things everybody should be doing. Everybody should be taking a whole food multivitamin made from food. Everybody should be taking a digestive enzyme because it helps to break down food and allow our bodies to absorb the foods that we're eating. Everybody should be taking a probiotic or eating foods that are rich in that area. So like your kombuchas or your fermented foods, things like that.
What would be your closing words of encouragement for those who have been on the fence for years and they know that they need to make peace with hunger? They know that they need to address their eating habits. Give them the boost that they need.
Yeah. So if I was able to do it, I'm telling you, I was a junk food junkie, like would eat thousands of calories in just candy and chips and everything. So if I can turn around by a miracle, I'm telling you, supernatural miracle of just praying and asking God to help me, anybody can. I promise you, anybody can. And all it does is just you deciding to commit to the process and take it one step at a time. Every time I master one thing, then God will send me the next step. He never said, These are the 12 steps and you go for it. Have at it, Celeste. Never. When he says he'll never leave you nor forsake you, he means it in even these kind of areas, even the area, especially the area of food. So be encouraged that you can do it too.
What an encouraging conversation for those of us who desire to take charge of our eating. Our guest today on Excellent Living was Dr. Celeste Owens, a trauma specialist and psychologist by training. But she's also a certified natural health professional and the author of the books Making Peace with Hunger and the 40-Day Surrender Fast. You can connect with Dr. Celeste and order her resources when you visit her website, drcelesteowens.com. That's drcelesteowens.com. You can get a CD copy of this interview, Making Peace with Hunger, and learn more about this weekly broadcast when you visit our website, excellentliving.org. While there, you can subscribe to our email list. Again, that's excellentliving.org. You'll be the first to know about upcoming Excellent Living events and get an invite to our monthly virtual gathering for women on Zoom called First Wednesdays. Meet Cheryl on video. She's the Good News Anchor on YouTube. You can check out the short video episodes when you search on YouTube, Cheryl Martin, Good News Anchor. That's Cheryl Martin, Good News Anchor. You can also get them delivered directly to your email inbox when you subscribe to our email list. Are you following us on Instagram? We'd love for you to do so. You can find us at instagram.com/excellent_living. That's excellent_living. Remember, we exist to inspire and empower you to do all of life God's way because it's the best way. Thanks so much for tuning in. May our God continue to enrich you in every way.